Yeah, so we're going to talk about the new Child's Play movie, a remake of the 1988 classic, my all-time favorite movie, the original. Anyways, so this new Child's Play movie still follows a sort of similar basic plot. So after moving to a new city, Andy Barclay receives a special present from his mother, which is a seemingly innocent buddy doll that becomes his best friend, because he does have a little bit of trouble making new friends. When the doll suddenly takes on a life of its own, Andy unites with some of these other children that he does make friends with over time throughout his interactions with this new doll, and they all have to kind of band together to stop the sinister toy from wreaking bloody havoc. So it's actually a very different, and I wasn't expecting it to be so different going into it, but it is, aside from some of the basic details, we've got some of the same characters with the same names as the original, and it's still about a killer doll, but there's so much that's different about this movie in comparison to the original. A lot of things unfold differently throughout the movie, and I think if you go into this movie expecting it to replicate the original, and you want to compare them to each other in that way, it's probably going to affect your enjoyment of this new film. Luckily, I went into this one not really caring so much about it being so similar to the original, and in fact, I think I rather applaud that it separated itself from the original, or at least so much more than most other remakes do, and to the point where you could almost change just a few things in the movie, retitle it, and it could be its own movie, really. I think it moves at a rather frantic pace, but I guess in a way that's good because it never really has any dull moments. I really love the first half, or maybe the first 2/3 of the movie, but the second half does get a little messy, maybe a little rushed. I think it perhaps lacks that one special scene to completely throw it over the top, like in the original, when Chucky comes alive. There's not really any scene in this new movie that rivals that scene, but overall, I had a really good time with the movie, and I do have a lot of other points here that we can discuss, but before we do, let's hear your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, actually, before I get into my thoughts, I'm wondering, what was your theater experience with this?
Okay, I've actually seen it twice in theaters.
Okay.
I had to see it twice just to kind of solidify my rating on the movie. It actually came out in Australia just a little bit earlier than it did in the US and most other countries, so I saw it the very first session, which was at 10 a.m. on a Thursday here, which would have been a Wednesday over there. I went and saw it with my wife. We were actually the only people in the theater.
Oh, God. Okay.
And well, I guess, I don't know how it works over there, but most people are at work when a new movie comes out here in the very first session, so I actually took the day off work to go watch it. Luckily, being the only people in the theater, I didn't have to contend with other people acting like idiots, which is a story I'll tell later on towards the end of the show, because I did watch another movie last night where I had a very poor experience like that.
Is it Annabelle?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the second time I saw it, which I saw it a few days later, there were a few people there because it was a Sunday night. There were a few other people, but they were good. They acted appropriately.
Another quick question: did much, in your opinion, change between your first and second viewings of this one?
No, not a whole lot changed. And one thing I do when I watch and rate a movie is I try to compare it to just all these other movies that I would have given similar scores to, and I think, did I enjoy it more or less than those movies? And that's kind of just what I always do, even on the second viewing. And the second viewing, I still enjoyed it as much as the first viewing.
Yeah, so I've just seen this movie once, so my opinion may not matter as much as Chucky's, especially since Chucky's name is Chucky, but I thought, no, this wasn't a surprise to me, but I thought somewhat underwhelmed. I still thought it was a somewhat enjoyable movie, and there's definitely some things I liked about it, but I just sort of expected more from it. And a big part of that might be what you saw, Chucky, that there wasn't really a big scene, even toward the end in the supermarket. Like, there's some chaos, but it wasn't like some extraordinarily memorable sequence that, people are going to be remembering for the next 10 years. I don't know, I liked a lot of the story, but there just wasn't a whole lot here that I thought, well, this is going to be something that's going to stick with me. One of the big issues with me, I mean, there's only, in my opinion, only one kill in the movie that was even particularly great. One of them had the potential to be okay, but the lighting was just a bit dark. And one of them was sort of a generic car crash type thing, and that also didn't do a whole lot for me. I liked a lot of the characters, and I think another big issue was just I couldn't get over the face change. It's just throughout the movie I kept looking at that face and like that's not. I don't know, it just sort of rubbed me the wrong way. I know it's probably something that many people could probably get over, but every time I saw Chucky on screen, I'm like, it doesn't do it for me. The new origin story was really interesting. I'll be honest, I'm sort of like 50-50 and rather than not I liked it, but it did lead to a little more interesting beginnings for Chucky.
The doll itself, like I was saying at the start, if you're comparing, well, pretty much anything to the original and side by side, you're probably going to think, well, this doll looks even sillier than the original doll, which some people thought. I don't know how often you heard this, but as a Chucky fan, I do hear some people say, even the original doll, like, what kid really would have wanted a doll that looked like that?
I actually have never heard that.
Yeah, well, some people say that, but at the end of the day, it's just a little kid's doll, so whatever. But this one is a much more sophisticated type of, I guess you can even, it is a robot, technically, yeah. So, whereas the original one's not. So that's a fairly striking difference there. In this movie, as it's going through its learning phases, that was, I thought, really fun, especially how it picks up on some of the bad habits, because we see at the start, okay, so this guy who's just been fired from the company, he kind of removes a lot of the safety parameters in the coding of the doll. He probably didn't have too much time to think it over. He just took out a bunch of code and then shipped it, and then we all know what happens. Yeah, so it was kind of just amusing as he picks up all these little bad habits. You see him at the start mimicking how he's brushing his teeth, and then suddenly the next scene is Andy making a sandwich with a really sharp knife, and he stabs it into the cutting board. So Chucky kind of mimics the stabbing motion. It's cute in a way.
I also did like the line, "This is for Tupac." Which I sort of I laughed a lot at that scene. That's pretty funny. Probably actually one of the few really funny scenes.
Yeah, it is actually more like a puppy dog in the movie, yes, in a way. Yeah. So there's certain scenes in the movie where, I almost wanted to shed a tear because he's trying to do something that he thinks is fun or something in a loving way, ends up being a totally creepy, naughty thing that he's done, and eventually goes way over the top with it.
Only a little, yeah.
Yeah, and, there's that scene where they're watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and Andy and his friends are watching this movie, they're laughing, having a good time, so Chucky's kind of seeing that like, oh, so they think that's fun, okay, he goes, gets a knife, and it's like, heads up, bitch! So, yeah, I thought it was really fun watching him kind of pick up all these bad habits, and he doesn't want to be evil. He's trying to do things out of friendship or love or whatever you want to call it, whatever he's programmed to do there. And yeah, it just goes south as he picks up all those bad habits.
There weren't that many scenes that, overly, shocked or surprised me. But that one scene in which Andy wakes up and he's just walking to the bathroom and then he notices there's something left for him on his cabinet. I did really like that scene. And the reaction, like, oh my god, what do we do now?
Nice little bow on it and everything, yeah.
I will say, just a quick note, because of the different origin, Chucky was, in some ways, honestly, he was even a little creepier because, well, he's not exactly human, so it's felt a lot more, I don't know, like inhuman, and gave a sort of creepy vibe to it.
I guess we should mention the voicing by Mark Hamill, which I think is pretty good, but it certainly isn't going to overthrow Brad Dourif as the definitive voice of Chucky, especially since it's more of a robot this time around, there are a lot of limitations as to how much range that he can put into the voice, I think. That there's no real reason for this doll to get as angry and use as much profanity as the original Chucky does.
I would argue there's not many reasons for anybody to use as much profanity as the original Chucky did.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the voice of the doll is it's decent. It's fitting, but it's probably not anywhere near as special as the original as well.
Yeah, I think a big issue with this movie for me was that as I was watching it, there wasn't much in this movie that really stood out to me. I enjoyed it as I was watching it, but most of the scenes just sort of pass you by. And like I said, it's one of those movies where after you're done with it, you sort of wonder, well, how much of this am I going to remember in a few weeks?
Probably my biggest gripe with Cult of Chucky was the introduction of, multiple dolls. And the ending of this movie, because he can control all these other products, and he's in a he's in a department store which sells a lot of toys.
That is, by the way, one of the shittiest looking department stores I've seen in my life.
yeah, and look quite drab, I guess. And I think there's a little bit of a similarity there with him controlling all these other products, and similar to how in Cult of Chucky, you've got multiple dolls, and I don't know, it gets a little convoluted, and I'd rather just see Chucky doing the work, not getting other toys to do the work for him.
I think that was a big problem with that one, the sort of car crash sequence, like a lot of that was, sort of finally moved from Chucky himself, and I don't know, that scene in particular just really didn't do much. I'm also not entirely convinced how much I like the characters, the police officer and his mother. I don't know, I don't think they were particularly bad, but at the same time, I sort of question how much it really added to the movie. I don't think they did as much with her as I wish they did. But that one female friend of Andy's, I forget what her name was. It was some strange name.
Fallon?
Yes. Yeah, I've never heard that name before in my life. But I thought she was an interesting character, and I sort of wish they did more with her. But I don't know. I have no idea if they're going to. But if they happen to continue this story on, it'll be interesting to maybe see her come back, and especially the mother, because she's so young in this movie.
She had a very productive 16th birthday.
Yeah, that scene also cracked me up. That's so she's pretty young here, and I sort of think it works out pretty well though. I sort of appreciate how they sort of kept the same, quote unquote beginnings that from the '88 movie. Mother just wants to get something special for her son's birthday, and in this way gets it a little easier than she did in the first one. I just think the movie has a lot of interesting things in it, but a lot of it just doesn't seem overly memorable to me.
The little buddy song they sing is kind of catchy.
Is that also on your Spotify?
Well, maybe in the future. Well, I mean, if you listen to just the simple lyrics towards the end of it, there's a little bit of a creepiness to it.
Well, because that's also how the movie, the song that went through the credits was just that song playing, and that was so creepy. It actually, in a way, it sort of reminded me of Under the Line, which also ended with a very sort of low-key song that on the surface might not, be overly sinister, but it just sort of came off creepy.
Yeah. Probably not as creepy as the song in End of the Line.
Yeah, I don't think much can be as creepy as that. I have to say I was somewhat disappointed there's no after-credits scene, but that's okay.
Yeah, well, geez, I hate after-credit scenes, and especially if I enjoy the movie, I typically try to just listen through the whole credits, even just like listen to the music that they've got playing and see if it adds anything to the movie or not. Not necessarily wait for a scene, but it's so much more difficult in a theater. You've got people in there like trying to rush you out of the theater. Like you feel kind of weird for staying all the way to the end.
Yeah, I guess it's worth mentioning. I saw this movie like a week and a half after it came out. So in my theater, there's like maybe 25 people there. I was actually surprised there was that many, especially in my area. I'm sort of in Midwest USA. It's not like a a giant craving for horror movies. I don't know, mostly it was just teenagers who came. I had an okay theater experience, and with not that many people there, did it really bother me? And I sort of, because this was toward the end of the night. I think this is probably the last movie they had playing, so I was able to stay until the end without any issue, but I didn't really get anything from it. So that was just somewhat disappointing, but that's okay.
And I noticed, I saw the soundtrack popped up on YouTube like a week or two ago, I think just before the movie came out, like the full soundtrack, and they actually also redid the original theme music. I'm not sure. I'm guessing it didn't play at any stage at the end credits, which I didn't really stick around too much for.
I didn't notice it, but then again, I could have been deeply unabsorbent.
But yeah, if you go on YouTube, there is a different version of it. Maybe it's like a hidden type track on the soundtrack, because the YouTube video I watched, I think you have to skip all the way to the end after like 30 minutes of silence, and then you can hear it. And I only found out because of the YouTube comments. Anyways, as I said, it is a remake of my all-time favorite film, and I think for a lot of people that would typically be tough to watch. But for me, it didn't really affect me all that much because it's just so different. A few basic details are the same, but just so much of it is different that it almost feels like a totally different movie. And I really enjoyed a lot of the interactions with the doll and how it learns, and as it builds up its homicidal profile, if you will. The ending could have been a little better. It feels like Chucky gets defeated a little too easily.
So what you just point out, the ending after that, where maybe the evil isn't truly over, that sort of bothered me because I don't know how that even happened. It seems like a sci-fi ending to me.
Yeah, there's definitely a sci-fi aspect to it. I don't know if I'd lump it into a sci-fi category, but yeah, it because it's so technology driven. I guess you could say that. But yeah, overall, just from a pure enjoyability standpoint, like I did have a lot of fun watching the movie. And while I think the movie itself probably not as good as a lot of the other Chucky movies, I still give it a 9 out of 10.
That has to be one of the highest ratings I thought anybody gave it.
Yeah. Look, I mean, for me, the first two original Chucky movies are 10 out of 10s. And then I would say I enjoyed this just as much, if not slightly more, than something like Bride of Chucky, which I'd give an 8. So, yeah, I did struggle between an 8 and a 9, but I think I'm settling, or I'm just giving it a slight edge, and it just makes it to a 9.
Yeah, so I sort of liked quite a few things in this movie, but there's just so many unspectacular scenes, just so sort of run-of-the-mill type horror scenes. I don't know, it's just a movie that didn't strike me as anything special. And I feel like many of the reviews I've read have been somewhat lukewarm, and that's pretty much how I feel about it. I wasn't really expecting all that much from it, but I don't know, even so, I was just sort of, the whole thing sort of felt sort of meh to me, so I don't know. I ended up giving this an above average rating anyway, a 7.5, but probably if I had to round it down to a 7, because while there's decent things in the movie, and so, characters I really liked, there wasn't that much going for it. And like I said, there's only really one good kill that stood out, including a heated pipe and a table saw, but that was pretty much it. Everything else was, it just didn't do much for me. And the whole conclusion, while it was nice to see Tim Matheson, I was sort of expecting something a little more epic than what we got. And a part of that, like Chucky said, is probably because the Chucky doll gets defeated a little more easy than you might expect it to. So I don't know. I feel okay with my 7.5 rating. It was definitely an okay movie, and I don't think it's going to really disappoint many people. But I also have a hard time believing there's going to be all that many people who come out of the theater saying, "Hey, I've got to get this on Blu-ray and DVD. It's my all-time favorite." I just don't see it.
Though I do got to get it on Blu-ray when it comes out.
I'm sure you do. I did hear somebody say, and I have no idea what you feel about this, But somebody said that if they had taken this a different way, if they had called it a Child's Play remake, but just changed the design of the doll, and just went with a whole new movie, people might have liked it more. So, just something I wanted to mention.
I think that's the problem, that a lot of people find it difficult to not compare it to the original. And because they're comparing like for like, it just, you can't help but say, well, this movie didn't do that specific scene as well as the original did. Like you said, there's a sequence towards the end involving a car, which I guess is their own version of the car sequence in the original, where Chucky's, stabbing through the seats and stuff. It's not anywhere near as entertaining as the original scene, even though it's different characters, kind of a different outcome.
I do have a little story about this. Some of the people in the theaters, there was a woman with, I believe, was probably her either son or grandson. It's a young kid, no more than like 8. After the movie was over, I heard this woman asking her son or grandson, what he thought about the movie. And this kid, so take this, with a grain of salt. But this kid said it was probably his favorite version of Chucky, which I thought was interesting. Which means this kid has seen the other Child's Play movies. So I know that's just sort of cute. So apparently some people were happy with it. So hey, who am I to complain?
Yeah. I wouldn't mind a doll that does all these things for me. Sings me to sleep.
I do not want a doll that can tap into my TV and my car. I don't want that. So yeah, I'm going to have to do a hard pass.